right. I believe we are officially live here at Moneyline MMA, coming to you guys for UFC 306. Sean O'Malley will be defending his belt against Dvalishvili in the bantamweight division. And just before they take the cage, Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko will also be putting the women's flyweight belt on the line, as their last bout ended in a very disappointing, very anticlimactic. Dang it, that's the word I was looking for. Anticlimactic way, with a majority draw, boring decision there. Not the fight. The fight was good. Just isn't. It seemed like it was a little bit fixed, maybe. But those are some allegations. I will let others provide more information behind. In any case, they will be fighting to officially put this belt back in the hands of either Grasso or Shevchenko. Of course, we've got the rescheduled bout between Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez on here as well. Last time we saw Brian Ortega and Lopez were supposed to fight lightweight. Brian T. City got sick or something, backed out, and Denige steps in like 20 minutes notice, almost literally, and fights Diego Lopez. Before we get too deep into our picks here for this coming Saturday, UFC 306, let's quick recap from last weekend. We had the main event between Gilbert Burns and Sean Brady, co-headlined by Jessica Andrade fighting Natalia Silva. And I'll be frank, I wasn't able to get too many eyes on this in these fights specifically. I was kind of in and out watching. I was pretty busy Saturday, but I saw some of the fights kind of in and out as I had time to look. So if you were able to see the fights, you can provide some more context for us, Jose. But in the end, as far as the major picks go, right, my 5-weight, Steve Garcia came in and finished Kyle Nelson, did the job. Jose's 5-weight is continuing to be it's almost a streak now. Jose, the 5-weight you pick just doesn't even fight. You pick a 5-weight and their fight gets canceled. So we'll have to tune in soon to see who the canceled fight of UFC 306 will be. Courtesy of Jose Sanchez. Otherwise, 4-weight, my 4-weight was Costa. That didn't happen. Otherwise, we also had Natalia Silva. That was one that we had a disagreement on, but Natalia Silva did get the job done against Jessica Andrade. So props to her for beating Jessica Andrade. Like I said, I wish I could have a little bit more kind of dialogue on exactly what happened in that fight, but I did not see it. And as well as it looks like I'm trying to see, it looks like the Ryan Spann fight was also canceled. I mean, how many fights on this card were canceled? This is just a joke, dude.
Yeah, my 5 and 4-weight, and like you said, a lot of my 5-weights lately, I feel like 3 out of my last 5 weights, 3 out of my last 5 for 5-weights have been getting canceled. I just very unfortunate, including and yeah, my 4-weight got canceled, so no Ryan Spann. So I just went 2-2 for what it was, I guess. Actually, I wouldn't even. I only went 2-2 this week. I can't math right now. I'm sorry. I went 2-1.
Yeah, I was gonna say you couldn't have had 4 because 2 were canceled. But yeah, I'm seeing that OSP occurred. He had an illness. So, due to OSP illness, they rescheduled a bout for UFC 307. That's the reason Ryan Spann didn't fight. I mean, wow. I don't know if it was a weight cut thing, but it just seems like a bad streak of the UFC canceling these fights very last minute. Like, that's crazy. They couldn't even, obviously, they just decided to scrap it and do it later instead of finding Spann a new opponent. Can the UFC figure out weight cuts so these fighters aren't getting hurt so much? It's kind of a joke. I might go ahead and say it's kind of a joke. You don't see that happening so much in other promotions. But in any case, the last one to discuss would obviously be the main event. Jose and I both took Sean Brady. He does get the job done against Gilbert Burns. He landed an insane amount more strikes than Gilbert Burns and landed 7 of his 17 takedown attempts, totaling for over 10 minutes of control time. Sean Brady kind of put a clinic on Gilbert Burns. I would have thought, if I was able to see ahead of time all that control time, I'd have been a little bit more nervous for Gilbert Burns' jiu-jitsu acumen, but not a single submission attempt out of Gilbert Burns. As Sean Brady just had the wrestling prowess, the striking prowess. Really, no part of that fight did Gilbert Burns even look like he was in it. Not a single round. It seemed like a pretty clean 50-45 to me. I actually am not seeing. Oh, yep. Looks like 2 of the 3 judges agreed. Chris Lee and Brian Miner also agreed that it was 50-45, but David Lethaby somehow found one of those rounds to go in Gilbert Burns' favor. I would assume that's round 3 because that's the round Gilbert Burns was not within like 20 strikes of being outstruck by Sean Brady. It must have been round 3, but to me that's just a judge searching for something to give Gilbert Burns because he felt bad. Gilbert Burns just did not produce, and it's unfortunate. You know, he's a guy I like a lot, and you know, now we're looking at in his past 6 fights, he's got 2 wins, and guess what? One of those is against Jorge Masvidal. Gilbert Burns all of a sudden looks terrible, and I don't mean that like in the cage he's a bad fighter. I just mean like in his recent history, whoever they match him up against next, it's gonna be hard to justify him being a favorite. Gilbert Burns is gonna be an underdog, most likely going into his next fight. I'm curious to see who it ends up being, but that'll be something to monitor going forward. I think Gilbert Burns might have to become a gatekeeper. I think that's his destiny.
I kind of agree with you on that, Nick. As it's kind of like almost like the Tony Ferguson effect, where like he's so good and he has the opportunity to beat a lot of the guys he's losing to, but then as just the time goes on, you just kind of see him just kind of diminishing. Like he's not the same dude that obviously that brought him into start. I mean, he was in the UFC for a while, but he's not like, you know, how he blew up during the COVID era. And yeah, now like that's why I went with Sean Brady too. Just thinking of like his most recent fights, and then like looking at that Jorge Masvidal fight as you mentioned. Yeah, he did beat Jorge Masvidal, but then also looking at how Jorge Masvidal left the UFC as well. And like, so is it really that impressive? Maybe it was impressive in 2019 if he were to beat Jorge back then, but like the Jorge that he beat too was kind of like, you know, Jorge kind of already out the door himself. So nah, I totally agree with you on that, Nick.
And gotta say, Sean Brady putting himself in a really good spot doing what he needed to do, because his only loss in his entire professional career makes the storylines. The UFC likes their storylines, and it's another point here at Moneyline MMA. We like to remind everybody, the UFC likes those storylines. If you see an opportunity for a storyline, a lot of times it comes true. Sean Brady's only loss in his professional career is Bilal Muhammad. Looking at that, it's almost obvious that he gets the win and becomes one of the next challengers to the said fighter that he lost against. Now, I will say it's a very stacked division, welterweight. I'm not sitting here going to guarantee like, yep, the next belt is going to Bilal versus Sean Brady. I'm not really convinced of that. There's some other guys that might get the shot first, but I do think Sean Brady might chill out and wait that out and get one of the future shots against Bilal. But without any further ado, let's move on to the main card or the main event at least, of UFC 306. As a reminder, at Moneyline MMA, we make 5 picks. Jose and I separately make 5 picks on the card that we're discussing. In this case, there's 10 fights on UFC 306, which is kind of thin for a pay-per-view. As mentioned earlier, with some of the cancellations and rebooking the UFC's had to do lately, it puts a couple, like the timeline of this in a little jeopardy. I feel like the prelims are always very, very thin, and if a prelim has to get canceled, I don't know, man. It's hard to justify the amount of money the UFC is asking for people to spend, and I don't even want to get into the whole ticket situation for this show, because I doubt anyone watching or listening to this will be attending, and if you are, let us know down below. We'd love to know what it was like in person, but in general, it just seems like one of those events we're going to be watching from our couches, so it doesn't matter what they're selling tickets for. It doesn't matter how many tickets get sold. In the end, it's going to be a great show. But as I was saying earlier, we make our picks here at Moneyline MMA. Of the 10 fights on UFC 306, Jose and I pick 5 individually and weigh them in order of confidence. 5 being the heaviest weight and therefore the highest confidence. 1 being the lowest weight and therefore the least confidence. And like I said, those picks are made individually, and then right before the show, we just confer so that we know what order we're going in, because we always give our locks of the week first. We're going to go with our heaviest weights first and go down to our 1 weight with any contradictions or agreements noted along the way. So that being said, to break us open for UFC 306. I'm taking us immediately to the main event. We haven't done this in a while, Jose. Usually the main event sticks around. It's a good fight, and it's not something we have such a high confidence weight on, but for me at least, that's going to change this week. As I mentioned earlier, Sean O'Malley is defending his belt against Merab Dvalishvili, and this is kind of a long-anticipated fight. I mean, Merab was this is the same person who came back. Jose, you might have to remind me, when was it that Merab came into the cage and wore Sean O'Malley's jacket? Like, that felt like it was a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I would say spring of last year. It was Aljamain Sterling, right? It was when he knocked out Aljamain Sterling.
Oh yeah, it was against Aljo. Yes, so it was August of last year. It was literally a year and a month ago.
Yeah, yeah.
So not quite a year and a half, but a year and a month. That's great memory. It was when he beat Aljo, and Merab came in the cage, and he put on Sean O'Malley's jacket. And ever since then, it just felt like this fight has to happen. And we didn't get it right away. We get O'Malley versus Vera. And as I believe it was Merab had like a thumb or finger injury or something. He had to do some sort of surgery to fix an injury. I know that's why it didn't happen right away. But now Merab is healthy. Merab came off beating Henry Cejudo in February earlier this year just to give that little extra proof that he's ready for the title shot. And honestly, Merab has just been tearing it up lately. As interesting as it is to see, he starts 0-2 in his UFC career, losing a split decision and getting choked out by Ricky Simone. And ever since then, Merab Dvalishvili has just gone on a nuts streak of just beating everybody he's fought against. And the main weapon that he's got is his wrestling and his cardio. I mean, this man, I'm not sure I've ever seen, maybe for a guy that's got 1 or 2 fights in the UFC, sure. But for a guy that has as many wins as Merab does in the UFC, to average over 6 takedowns per 15 minutes is crazy. That is insane. The amount of wrestling that Dvalishvili uses is close to the highest, potentially, of UFC history. But the thing is I like to remind people, if you have to take someone down 6 times, you can average that out. That's 2 times a round. That means they're getting up, right? That means you can't take someone down twice that didn't get up. So there's something to think about there, right? If he's taking a guy down, but he has to do it 6 times in a fight to win, you just wonder, like, maybe he's getting the takedowns, but and the other thing is, how many submission wins does he have in his career? That would be 0. He has 0 submission threat, 0, zilch, none, 0% submission threat. I'm not at all concerned about it. And it starts to make me wonder, where in this process is Merab supposed to get a win? You're telling me he's supposed to stand with Sean and box with him for 25 minutes, or he's supposed to wrestle with Sean and keep him on the ground for 25 minutes? No way. No way that he takes down Sean O'Malley enough times to win a decision? No way. That's crazy. Because guess what? Merab isn't going to get a KO on Sean. We all know that. Merab's not going to submit Sean. We all know that. So really? So people are going to put their hard-earned cash and money to say Merab is going to wrestle Sean for 5 rounds to gain a unanimous decision win. That is crazy. That is just wild. That is one of the craziest. I cannot believe it. Sean O'Malley is currently a minus 128 favorite. I don't understand that at all. I really don't, man. I'm trying to find like I get it. Wrestling is a great skill, and a lot of times wrestlers, depending on their skill sets, a lot of people will say wrestlers beat strikers. Like if we were doing rock, paper, scissors, and it was like boxers, wrestlers, jiu-jitsu, or something like that, right? People would always be like, well, boxing isn't as good as wrestling because you can take someone down and you can't box them if they're on the ground. And I get that. That makes sense. But it's not like Sean O'Malley has a terrible takedown defense and the first takedown attempt is just going to get him on his back and he's helpless. You know what I'm saying? He knocked out Aljamain Sterling when he was trying to go for a takedown shot. Do you think Merab can just carelessly come in and shoot at Sean O'Malley, who has obviously been training wrestling and jiu-jitsu the past however many months, right? There's no way you can't not convince me that Sean O'Malley's entire camp hasn't been spent taking down or defending takedowns, transitions, reversals, all those kinds of things. Judo, like, come on, that's all Sean needs to do in his camp. The boxing is there. He'll get the knockout on Merab anytime he sees it. But man, unless Marab's able to come in here and land like 15 takedowns or something, or just somehow, for the first time in his entire UFC career, take someone down and hold them down the whole round, no way. And we're talking about him doing it to the champ. So yeah, there's just no way in my mind this is even close. To me, this is a very confident 5-weight. Jose, what do you think?
Yeah, Nick, I agree with you. I think it's crazy. I thought for some reason, because just looking at the odds today, I thought Merab would be the betting favorite, and I thought everyone would look at him to definitely out wrestle Sean O'Malley and possibly win it a decision. Like I just think out the bat, that's what I would have thought. So seeing Sean O'Malley right now as a -128 favorite is wild. So I thought it was going to be some bigger returns going with Sean O'Malley because I thought he was going to be at least a slight underdog. But even nonetheless, though, I definitely agree with you. I have Sean O'Malley, but I'm not as confident as you. He is my 2-weight. Reason being is my biggest fear is what I just said is Merab, as you mentioned, he can't really hold someone down. But Sean O'Malley also doesn't have the best wrestling takedown defense either. He does have a 62% takedown defense, but we've seen him like if Merab is strong enough, he can. My worry would be that he just holds Sean O'Malley down and does ground and pound and just gets the control time, and ultimately it's almost a boring decision win for Merab. That is my biggest fear. But that being said, too, Sean O'Malley, he's shown that he can keep up with better grapplers, and who knows, Merab may not even show much wrestling at all. Like for example, with Aljamain Sterling is probably one of the better, if not the best, grapplers that Sean O'Malley has faced, and he didn't really show much of a takedown threat. So maybe Sean O'Malley offers something on the feet where it's not worth it for them to shoot for a takedown on him yet. Like maybe just of his size and distance, which I think could play a big role in Merab whether or not he gets a takedown on Sean O'Malley or not. Because Sean O'Malley too, he is 5'11" compared to Merab being 5'6", and Sean O'Malley also has a 4-inch reach advantage over Merab. So. So Sean O'Malley, I think he's going to use his size and distance and to ultimately just have control of the entire fight. I think, but if Merab closes the distance and takes Sean O'Malley down, I'd be interested to see how Sean O'Malley is going to get up and come back from that because I think the best way Merab wins is just holding Sean O'Malley down control time. But Sean O'Malley, again, being the bigger guy, can use his size to an advantage, and also having such a high striking rate is crazy. Sean O'Malley lands 7.63 significant strikes per minute. So him being just this much bigger than Merab, I think is just going to be a big advantage to him to be able to just rack up the punches and ultimately even set up Merab for a TKO. I do think Sean O'Malley can knock out Merab. It's hard to say no anymore. To Sean O'Malley, it's just hard to deny him when he keeps winning and knocking out Aljamain Sterling and going toe-to-toe with Marlon Vera, all the way, redeeming himself. Like, Sean O'Malley really is starting to enter, like, the prime, if not he already is, and starting to become elite status fighter. And I think Merab is going to be just another guy along his way to really cement him. Like, now he's going against a really, like, probably the best wrestler now to date on his resume besides Aljo. And if he can withstand and finish Merab, which I think is doable, like just Merab shooting for a takedown and just catches him coming in, kind of like Conor McGregor's caught people in the past when he was in his prime, this can be something similar to that. So I do think Sean O'Malley will win, and if he wins, I do think he can actually put out Merab, but it's hard to say. I don't want to really say exactly what method, but I do think he's good enough to finish Merab. And but again, I'm just not as confident, so he is my 2-weight.
Okay. Yeah, man. I just think so we do agree, but definitely different confidence levels. I didn't even get into mentioning that Merab has that cut that happened that he posted about. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's pretty healed. I'm not acting like it's going to be a big thing going into the fight, but it's just another little way for Sean to earn points. He'll earn that damage. He gets one clean shot on Merab's upper eyebrow area right here, and that's bleeding. And that's all you need for points. That's damage points. And so then we're getting into the semantics of so Merab lands like Merab's really gonna have to do what he did against Petr Yan. He attempted like 30 some takedowns on Petr Yan and landed like 8 or 11 of them, right? So he landed consistent takedowns in each fight for like 1 to 2 control time minutes each round, and he was winning the striking while doing that. There's just no way you can convince me that in between takedowns, Merab's going up and down trying to go take down Sean. That first of all, Sean doesn't have leverage because you already mentioned the size difference there. Sean should already have the leverage. If they go up against the cage, Merab, maybe he's strong enough to pick up Sean and slam him. But I don't know, man. There's some amount of conditioning that every human has, and everybody's like, oh, Merab, he never gets tired, blah, blah, blah. All right, we'll see. We'll see, though. We'll see. Because that's what I say. I say we'll see. Merab, yeah, he didn't look tired against Henry Cejudo. Okay, he's kind of washed up. Straight up, Henry Cejudo's washed up, dude. This is 2024 Henry Cejudo. That's washed up stuff right there. And like I said, the way he's going to win this fight is like he did against Petr Yan in that 5-round fight. That was 25 minutes, and Merab lands 11 takedowns. And I just looked now. That's 49 takedown attempts, officially. 49. That's how he had to beat Petr Yan. You think that's going to work against Sean O'Malley? I'm not saying that to you, Jose. I just mean anybody that's listening. Like, that is wild. That is not how Sean O'Malley's going to lose. There's no way. I don't think there's much more that needs to be said, man. I think Sean O'Malley, one way or another, sure, it could be decision. Sure, it be KO. But, look, Sean O'Malley's going to get this done. And I think Merab is going to be disappointed leaving this fight. He just doesn't have the size. He does not have, like, the one thing he has is conditioning and wrestling. I mean, that's just not enough, in my opinion. That's nowhere near enough here. If we were talking about a prelim fight, different story. This is a champion. This is Sean O'Malley, who made Aljamain Sterling look like an embarrassing mess. Like, just saying. And Marlon Vera should have been cold on the canvas, too, after that knee. So, just saying. But in any case, that'll be my 5-weight pick. Very confident in Sean O'Malley getting the job done. Jose agrees with his 2-weight, and we shall move on to Jose's 5-weight.
So for my 5-weight, this is the lightweight bout between Daniel Zellhuber and Esteban Ribovics. Right now, Zellhuber is he's a big betting favorite at minus 250, while Esteban is a betting underdog at plus 190. This one, I'm going with the Mexican Daniel Zellhuber. Dude's been looking phenomenal. And I'm not going to lie, though, a big reason, like, both of these guys, this is a good matchup. Both guys, they both are just, the way their wins, they get their wins is pretty diverse. They got a good amount of KOs and submissions and can even go to decision. So I like what I've seen from both guys. But I'm just, and the reason, and like, it was at first a little tough for me to judge, but I like going with Daniel Zellhuber. The biggest reason too is just his size compared to Esteban. He's 6'1", Esteban's 5'10", but Daniel Zellhuber has an 8-inch reach advantage over Esteban, and I think that's gonna be a huge factor, especially because both these guys throw a high volume of punches, and kind of like Sean O'Malley, when you have a guy that throws a high volume of punches, and then he has a long reach advantage. To me, that's a perfect setup to an eventual KO. So I like Daniel Zellhuber a lot in this, enough to where I think he possibly could get a finish. And again, I'm just going based off his size advantage and his striking percentage, his striking rate, I should say. But Esteban, he lands a high volume too. He lands 6.2, but he has not been in the UFC as long. Daniel Zellhuber not as much either, but Esteban's only got 4 UFC caliber fights, one of them being a Dana White Contender Series fight. But he just has that impressive win over Terrence McKinney, and in the first round KO via head kick, which is extremely impressive. So that just shows me enough that he is extremely dangerous to even put out Daniel Zellhuber. Zellhuber has never been KO'd, but I do think Esteban has that power. Both of these guys have actually never been submitted or KO'd. Both of these guys have only lost a decision. So I think this one would be the first one where either guy can be put to sleep for the first time in their careers. But I'm going with Daniel Zellhuber just the size advantage, and just both guys are just equally diverse. Both guys are finishers, have the grappling, and again, they can make it to decision. And which this ultimately I may be stunned, and that'd be the second way. Would just be Daniel Zellhuber via decision. But I most likely want to take Daniel Zellhuber via KO/TKO. What are your thoughts? And he's my 5-way. I feel that confident about him. What are your thoughts on this fight, Nick?
This will be the first disagreement of our show tonight for my 3-weight, so I'm less confident than you are. But I do have my Esteban Ribovics as my 3-weight as a disagreement. For me, I do concede the fact that the reach advantage Daniel Zellhuber has is quite significant, given the fact that it's also should be a bigger ring with the pay-per-view event. But to be honest, man, I'm not seeing that as enough for the offsetting disadvantages I'm seeing on Zellhuber's side. Specifically, like, I'm wondering where all this hype is coming from. Like, I don't know. After watching some of Zellhuber's past, like, yeah, he looks good in the ring, but who is he beating, right? And I guess I could say that you could say that about both guys, right? Esteban Rivic's one and only good like high caliber win is, okay, Terrence McKinney. But I'll make the same argument here with Daniel Zellhuber. In fact, I could say he has zero. I mean, Francisco Prado, we can't say anything about how good he is. He's 1-2 in the UFC. Christos Giegos is a journeyman. I think that's not rude to say at all. A journeyman at best. And same with Lando Venata. That dude has more losses than wins in the UFC. Daniel Zellhuber lost to Trey Ogden. Maybe that would have been one of the better guys, but even he has just as many losses as wins in the UFC, or at least losses in no contests and wins. You know, maybe Lucas Almeida, but that's a contender series win. And Lucas Almeida is also 2-3 in his UFC tenure. So I'm just failing to see where a lot of the hype is coming from Zellhuber's perspective. I think Ribovics could be wrong here, but I think he has the power advantage. I expect this fight to be standing. I don't think either of these guys are really going to go for wrestling. I think a ground and pound is possible if someone gets knocked down or trips or something. But I don't think we're going to really see like clean wrestling takedown attempts from either of these guys. And they both have 7 KO wins under their belt. So in terms of like the straight up, wins, losses, they're identical. But I would name Ribovics, in my opinion, as the guy with more power. I think they're going to be standing in the cage, swinging. And I expect Ribovics to push forward. I think, as much as I can see the reach disadvantage for Ribovics, I think he's going to be able to push forward, and it's barely going to be noticeable as he's pressuring Zellhuber. So in my opinion, Zellhuber's going to get a little exposed here. I'm not sure he gets finished, but I just think Ribovics can't be overlooked, especially part of my pick here is in the value. I'll get Ribovics at a plus 190. I just like that a lot. Like I said, it's something that I'm not going to put too much into it. That's definitely nothing I parlay. No, not even close. I just think there's some good value on Ribovics, given that Zellhuber's hype, for the lack of a better term, just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me.
Okay, I see what you're saying. No, yeah, I totally agree with you. Totally valid that Ribovics, he has legit knockout power too. And like I said, I do think that either guy is prone to be knocked out for the first time in their career in this matchup. I'm just kind of going with Zellhuber because again, I'm being biased because of the size advantage. And you mentioned he hasn't really been like nobody's. And again, you said you can mention Ribovics. I think the best guy either guys would be in just overall is Terrence McKinney. So I'll give that one to Ribovics. But in the end, I'm also a little biased. I just think also the atmosphere of Mexican Independence Day for Zellhuber, I just think it's going to be I don't know. I just think I'm just going with him on this side.
Okay.
But I'm mostly just because of his size advantage and his history, just in terms of he's a finisher and just how diverse he is. But again, I guess his size advantage is one of the biggest ones I'm going with. I feel so confident. He's my 5-weight.
Love that, man. And he is coming off performance win and a fight of the night, 2 in a row bonuses for Daniel Zellhuber. So he's going to be looking to get a third bonus in a row, while Ribovics is going to at least just look to get a win or his first bonus of the night for the UFC. But for that fight, Jose's got his 5-weight on Daniel Zellhuber. I have a 3-weight on Esteban Ribovics. So that'll conclude our first contradiction of the night. We do have one agreement between Sean O'Malley as my 5-weight and Jose's 2-weight. So therefore, let's move on to my 4-weight of Saturday afternoon, which is going to bring us to the feature bout of the UFC 306 pay-per-view card. And this one, I know all of us have been excited to watch. If you're tuning in for our show here, you're absolutely excited to see UFC veteran Brian Ortega step in against prospect and up-and-comer Diego Lopez. I'll never forget, we got to see Diego Lopez in real life, Jose. That was super entertaining, man. And ever since then, I've just not been able to deny how good he is, man. He's just insane. And it's one of those things. I know when this fight was first announced, it was like, which card was it, man? It was like earlier this year. I can't remember what card it was. They were supposed to fight, and then Ortega's like, no, let's do it at lightweight. And Lopez is like, sure. And then Ortega's like, actually, I'm sick. I can't do it. And it was really disappointing. I just
I
see you. If
can't
you,
remember. I know you're talking about. I can't remember the top of my head though.
I'm so mad. I can probably quickly pull it up here though. It was on June 29th. What was the card on June 29th? Um, I could find the card that was on June 29th. I believe that was the card though that it got mixed up. It was Pereira versus Prochaska number 2. Yes, that's correct. It was Alex Pereira versus Jiri the last time they fought their second match. And the co-main event was Diego Lopez versus Dan Ige when it was supposed to be Diego Lopez versus T-City at lightweight. And props to Lopez for still coming in there and getting the job done against Dan Ige, that last minute replacement with quite a different style. I mean, I remember as that was being announced, I was like, holy crap, like Dan Ige from T-City, those are two of the like almost bigger style differences you could really get from some guys in that division. But Diego Lopez was able to get the job done, and he didn't just go in there and choke out Dan Ige. He stood and boxed with him. It got a takedown, sure, and did try a submission on Dan Ige. Didn't land it, and still won the fight by unanimous decision. And it was at that point when I flipped my pick, because anybody who's been listening long enough will remember. I believe, I don't know if you did, Jose. I think we both did. I think we both took Ortega's T-City in that first matchup when they were supposed to be the co-main event. And I was pretty confident Ortega was going to get the job done. I think he was being overlooked, especially as the dog at the time. But man, now that some things have changed, I feel like part of my concern is just the fact that Ortega had to back out of that first fight. He's clearly not, like, I guess maybe we could say he's 100% now, but he clearly wasn't as of June 29th. We have some time removed since then, but I don't know. I'm not convinced at this point that T-City is the true T-City that we saw when he fought, arguably Frankie Edgar, Cub Swanson, some of the guys back in that late, right before COVID or right as COVID was hitting kind of phase. And then he took that loss to Volkanovski. But even then, he was kind of still at the end of that real prime of his career. Then gets that nasty shoulder injury loss to Yair and comes back and avenges it. And I was super confident, like, yeah, T-City's T-City, man. He's going to come in there and do it. But at this point, man, I can't. I'm sold on Diego Lopez. And to me, Diego Lopez is no concern of being submitted in this fight. There might be submission attempts from both sides. I think they both put pressure on each other. And to be honest, I'd probably lean on Ortega getting the first wrestling takedown attempt and potential takedown in general. But I don't think Diego's at all concerned. I think Diego's happy to be from his back, going for any kind of submission attempt he can. This dude averages 3.7 submissions per 15 minutes. I mean, Diego Lopez is not playing around. That's way more than T-City averages 1.2, just for reference. So we're saying, and by statistics, Diego Lopez attempts 3 times more takedowns than T-City Ortega. And I get it. T-City's had a little bit more high-level competition mixed in with his history. So when he's fighting guys like Yair, he's really not going to get that many submission attempts. In fact, the submission he landed against Yair in his win was his only submission attempt. So it's like, it's bad to the averages, but he still got the submission win. But in the end, man, to me, Diego Lopez wins the boxing here. I get that his striking differential is negative, but so is T-City. It's terrible. T-City's is actually horrifically negative. We're talking negative 2.5 strikes absorbed for Brian Ortega, where Diego Lopez is almost at least at that 0.7 range, where he's getting closer to breaking even. And we literally just saw him box Dan Ige. Are we confident that Brian Ortega could box Dan Ige right now? Maybe. Dan Ige's not amazing, and he did beat Yair. I would say Yair probably has a good fight against Dan Ige too. So, MMA math never works out, but I'm not trying to dog on Ortega here. I think him and Dan Ige would be a great fight. I just don't think he's got what it takes against Diego Lopez, man. Brian Ortega cannot lean back on his jiu-jitsu. He's going to have to grit it out, and that's usually how Ortega gets his wins. But, man, when it comes to Lopez, I just don't see that happening, man. I think Lopez is just genuinely better in all facets of the game here, and you're getting him at a minus 180 price. I think that's fair, given the veteran prowess of T-City and the fact that T-City, you think for how long he's been around, he might be a little older. He's in his low 30s still. He's 33 years old. He's very well still in that scope where if he beats Lopez, he's got an argument to start working his way up to fighting Ilya soon. But hey, man, in the meantime, I think this is all Lopez's game. Lopez also, for what it's worth, last note, does have the size advantage too. Speaking to that size advantage, 3-inch height and 3-inch reach. It's not significant, but I just think it's going to be enough, man. I think the size difference and the technique difference here will bring Ortega a loss. What do you think, Jose?
So that's a great assessment you made there, Nick. And uh, I was with you on Brian Ortega originally, like in the first time we picked him, and I know you just obviously just said you obviously got Diego Lopez, and I see why you made that switch. On the other hand, I am staying with T City. I like that he's the underdog now, and I truly agree he should be the underdog. I mean, Diego Lopez just he made his debut in the UFC and has fought 5 times in the meantime, while that's when T City was out from an injury and has only fought once, and that's when he came back and beat Yair earlier this year. So I do give it to Diego Lopez on being a lot more being more competitive during that time. Obviously, T City being out from injury, so that definitely that momentum goes on his side. And everyone he's faced thus far is actually, I do believe Diego Lopez has had a tough UFC showing so far in terms of like everyone he's gone against. They're like obviously debut against Mosfar Evloev, and then fighting Pat Sabatini, Sadiq Youssef, and Dan Ige. Gavin Tucker, like all these dudes beating them and finishing them is huge. Um, and he has a good resume, and but I do like Brian Ortega's resume a little more, just the people he's being, but he's just not been as competitive. Just he fought like he took a 2-year gap between 2018 to 2020 and fought once 2020 and then once in 2021, once in 2022, and took a 2-year gap again. So he's not really that active. And but when he comes in, he's fighting the best of the best. He's fighting Yair, Alex Volkanovski, or Max Holloway. And I think Diego Lopez, he has the potential to be as good as them for sure. I truly think I think Diego Lopez is definitely easily hanging up in the top 5. And but so is T City, and I think T City has not had his fair showing yet. I feel like he's always been like an injury prone. He's just not been as active as much as he should be. And I think that's just been very detrimental to him. You mentioned he's only 33 years old, and I think T City, I think we've almost been robbed a lot of what he could have been. And I think but when he comes in, he still shows like, hey, he's still that guy. He's just not doing it as often. So not let's forget, like he comes back, he only needed one submission attempt against Yair Rodriguez, and that was more than enough to actually lock it in and get it. And I do agree, Diego Lopez, the submission threat won't be existence there against Diego Lopez. And then when it comes to the striking, I think Brian Ortega, even though he's not the best striker, he still lands a good amount of significant strikes per minute with 4.07, and Diego Lopez lands 3.24. And they both these guys, they also absorb quite a bit. Brian Ortega 6.54 significant strikes per minute, and Diego Lopez 4.08. But you can argue like the people that Brian Ortega, like most of these are definitely coming from Max Holloway, Yair Rodriguez, and Volkanovski alone. Like those dudes are always gonna take a lot of damage, and I'm sure like the absorption rate's gonna definitely just go up quite a bit just from going against those guys alone. And when it comes to the takedown, I think Brian Ortega may be one of the first ones to initiate the takedown and just try to put Diego against the fence. And really, it's going to be both. I think are going to be playing literally the exact same game, going to have similar styles, and it's just going to be whoever implements it more. And I think Brian Ortega, I like him a lot as an underdog, and I truly think that he's going to come in and pretty much do what he's always done, and I think he's just going to look really good and just remind us who he is and why he should be like in title contention. That's what, and I'm not like trying to like just like I don't know the best way to say it, just ride too high on his horse, because Diego Lopez too. If he beats Brian Ortega, Diego Lopez, in my opinion, should be the next guy in line after Max Holloway then, for a belt. And that's, I truly think that like he should be one of the next guys in line. I like going with Brian T City just because he's just shown he's just still good even when he's been out for so long. And again, like before that he was out because of his injury, and that's the only thing I think that's detrimental to Brian Ortega's career is just his injuries. But every time he comes in, he has yet to really show like he's getting outclassed. Like he's only shown it like when against, I think the time he got really truly outclassed was when there was the doctor stoppage when he fought Max Holloway. But that's Max Holloway, and I don't think Diego Lopez will be landing the same amount of like strikes as Max Holloway. But I think this is going to be a good fight. Honestly, I don't know it'll even be stopped. I like Brian Ortega just winning this by decision. He out of his 16 wins, he's got 5 by decision, and I like him winning this one by decision. Kind of similar, like he hasn't done it in a while, but last time he went to this, he won by decision was in 2020. But he's shown numerous times he can make it to 5 rounds. So I like Brian T. City as the underdog in this one, and he is my 3-weight.
Like I said, I'm not trying to dog Ortega here too bad, but he has 2. I just counted 2 wins in the UFC in which he actually landed more strikes than his opponent. Of all the wins that he has against Renato Moicano, Cub Swanson, Frankie Edgar, even the most recent one, Yair Rodriguez, he's being outstruck. And I get that like being outstruck isn't that big of a deal. It's also damage. Damage is a big indicator. You could get tapped in the face 3,000 times, but if you're not showing damage, you shouldn't get too much of the points on the scoreboard. But I just think that speaks volumes, man. I think Diego Lopez is just way better in that striking aspect of things, and I think he's really going to put some damage on T City and make T City feel like, well, I got to get the submission here, or I'm not getting the win, and that's just not happening. Diego will not get submitted, in my opinion. I put a lot of money on that. If there was a bet out there to be made that I could say Diego Lopez does not get submitted, I'll put a lot of money on that. So yeah, we'll have to agree to disagree on this one. I just don't think T City has what it takes, which is sad because I did think he had what it takes a few months ago. But if anything, maybe it's not sad because I would have, in my opinion, I would have lost that pick. So either way you look at it. That being said, that was my 4-weight, and that is Jose's 3-weight, and we can move on to Jose's 4-weight.
For my 4-weight, this is actually on the prelims, and it's the female bout between Irene Aldana and Norma Dumont. Right now, Irene Aldana, she's a slight betting favorite at -120, while Norma Dumont is a slight underdog at -106. This one, I'm going with the former title challenger, Irene Aldana. This one was actually a really hard one for me to judge because Norma Dumont has been looking so good lately, and they both match up stylistically very well. I'm just going with Irene Aldana just because she's been at the top longer than Norma Dumont, and just the level of competition she's gone compared to Norma Dumont. I think what Norma Dumont brings to the table is going to be more explosiveness and a high-paced fight. I think this is definitely going to be a high-paced fight between the two. Irene Aldana, she is 36 years old, and Norma Dumont, she's 33, so in age, they're not too far off. And this one too, I think it'd be, in my opinion, even though Irene Aldana is a finisher, out of her 15 wins, she has 8 via KO/TKO. I don't really see her finishing Norma Dumont in this one. I think it's going to be her winning via unanimous decision is the best way I view it. Irene Aldana, how they match up physically, they're both, Irene Aldana is slightly tall. She's 5'9", Norma Dumont 5'7". And not really much of an advantage for reach advantage for Irene Aldana. She only has a 1.5 inch reach advantage. But when it comes to when the striking is Irene Aldana, she's a really good boxer, and she lands 5.24 significant strikes per minute. But Norma Dumont, she's also a really good kickboxer. She lands 3.11 significant strikes per minute. Irene Aldana does take more damage than Norma Dumont, so that's why I think this is going to be a good back and forth pace fight. I know Norma Dumont's going to land her shots on Irene Aldana and have her moments as well. I think, but in this one, it was a tough one. A lot of fights on this one are just we're extremely like a lot of fights we're not going to talk about. We're so close, like hard for me to decide, but I needed to decide on one. And for this one, I thought it was appropriate to go with Irene Aldana as my 4-weight because she does have a really good matchup in front of her, but it's more of like an up-and-coming contender in the weight class, and I think this is someone that Irene Aldana should be able to stop and stop Norma Dumont's. She's going to be able to stop Norma Dumont's momentum is what I truly think. Irene Aldana, I don't want to call her a gatekeeper for this weight class, but she can hang up there with the top 5, but in that division, really, like, who else is there? There's not that many women to really hang out with in the top 5. So, like, if Norma Dumont wins and beats Irene Aldana, she's gonna skyrocket, I think, for sure, for a title eventually too. But in this matchup right now, I'm liking Irene Adania so much. I think her boxing is going to ultimately lead her to victory to unanimous decision win over Norma Dumas. I feel so good about it. Irene is my 4-weight. Nick, do you have any thoughts on this fight?
No, I did not make a weight pick on this, but I do lean Irene Aldana only because she just shows more. Excuse me, she shows more urgency in her fights. Norma Dumont has 2 total finishes in her 11 wins career. I just don't think she puts enough urgency towards getting her fights won before the judges. I dislike, maybe it's personal bias, I just dislike fighters that lean on judges to get wins. It's just gross to me, and judges are almost always wrong in my experience. So I'll take Irene Aldana for those reasons.
So there you have it. Not much. Yeah, not much to me for to say on this fight alone. Other than it's just based on the division how it's set up. Like, with Ariana Aldana, like I just the people she's beating too. She should be beating. This is honestly, in my opinion, besides Amanda Nunes and Holly Holm being the toughest, fighters Irina's faced. Norma Dumont, I would say, is the toughest up and coming fighter that she's going to face. She's faced other somewhat up and coming fighters before too, but I think this one's going to be Ariana Dania's toughest challenge yet, for facing someone that's kind of making their way up the rankings. And for Norma Dumont, I mean, she just beat Jermaine Duranami, and which is very impressive, and beat her by unanimous decision. So if she keeps, I mean, she can keep that momentum going. And I do think they'll push her for a title pretty soon if she beats Irene. But that being said, again, I'm confident with Irene as my 4-weight. And yeah.
Sounds good. All right. Well, in that case, that brings us down to the lower end of at least my card. I think we both have we just have really 2 fights to discuss remaining here. 2 weights for me, 1 weight from Jose, and for me, my 2-weight is going to fall on one of the earlier fights on the card, and that's going to be actually the second fight in the early prelims. This will be Edgar Cairez fighting Joshua Van. And look, I'm taking Joshua Van here. He's kind of a last-minute replacement. It depends how close your definition is to be last-minute replacement. But Josh Van's coming off a tough loss against Charles Johnson. He seems to step in kind of late on a lot of fights, and partially because a lot of his fights are being canceled. Of course, before fighting Charles Johnson, he had 4 straight fight cancellations, with a couple being from the same card. And Joshua Van just having trouble finding those opponents, but I really think this is a good bounce back spot for him. You know, he obviously didn't look as good as we would have hoped against Charles Johnson, getting knocked out in the 3rd. But in the end, man, I think Joshua Van is in perfect spot here to make a comeback against Edgar Cairez. I think Cairez, you know, he's got a couple tough losses. You know, Tatsuro Taira is not a guy to scoff at losing against. And then the no contest to Daniel Lacerda that was overturned, that they redid, and in which Edgar Cairez got the submission win. So there's that, right? You could always wonder if Cairez is going to go for that wrestling game, but in the end, it was Lacerda that went for the takedown there, and Cairez just landed the submission. So unless Joshua Van, it's possible, right? Josh Van actually has landed 1 or more takedowns in 3 of his 4 UFC fights. So it's possible that he does go for a takedown here. But honestly, man, I think Josh Van, since he's coming off the first loss in a long time in his professional career, I think he comes out with some urgency. And I think that's going to benefit us and those who are betting on Josh Van. Definitely only do singles with this, since he was somewhat of a last-minute replacement. I don't even see a line right now on FanDuel. I'll have to double check, but from what I'm understanding from most of the other books, Joshua Van is about a 2-1 favorite, which means he's about minus 200 to Cairez's plus 100. I think this, like I said, this is just a perfect bounce back spot in terms of getting a guy who's willing to stand and box with him, and Josh Van's just going to land that KO, excuse me. So, in my opinion, sprinkle a little bit of your, sprinkle a unit or 2 of your betting money on Joshua Van, specifically by KO. He'll finish Cairez. Jose, I know you don't have any weights, but feel free to provide any input.
Yeah, this was a fight too that was really tough for me to pick as well. Especially because, as you mentioned, it was a little like last minute. But with Josh Van, I mean, I like it a lot. I was just trying to get like something I always look at is their size difference, because I think he's somewhat significantly smaller than
He's got a 6-inch disadvantage in reach and 2 inches height.
So that's the part. That's the only part I remember. I think I remember. Yeah, Edgar being slightly bigger. And I do like that. The bigger guy. So this is a tough one, but I do like Joshua Van as an underdog. I mean, Edgar did not get as much time to prepare for him. Um, yeah, this is a tough one to say. I almost have no weight on it. I mean, I actually have no weight on it. Um, I'm a little biased with Ed because when I was looking at this, I was actually looking at Edgar. Um, but uh,
So what if I
I would
told you that Ignacio lost to a guy that's 5'7"?
Ignacio. It was Joshua Van.
No, no, it wasn't. It wasn't Joshua Van. And I know this is a different fighter, but I'm just making the statement that like, I, I don't know, like if reach advantage is the one reason you're taking, or and this isn't even a weight, but like reach advantage to me isn't just one reason to take Zalhu or not Zalhuber. This is obviously a different fight. Kyrez versus Joshua Van. I just feel like, yeah, okay, it's some reach advantage, but like we've seen guys like Ignacio Bahamondes lose to guys that are over a half a foot shorter than he is.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if they're gonna be shorter, normally what I think they would bring to the table is an aggressiveness, like a wrestling style. That's normally
Mm-hmm.
because they have to. The wrestlers have to. And Josh Van, if he's willing to engage in the grappling and close that distance, 100%. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would have him if he's gonna close in the gap, then I feel better. Yeah, with Joshua Van. But if he's gonna try to play a kickboxing game, no matter what, if his opponent, if they have a long reach, I'm assuming it's really hard to find actually a really good wrestler that's a tall, lengthy dude. Majority of the time, they're
Oh
gonna
yeah.
specialize in the striking instead. So if he's gonna stand up on the feet with Edgar, it's gonna be a tough one. He's really gonna need to fill in those gaps and uh, close the distance if he wants to pretty much counter Edgar a lot. I think Josh can do it. I do like Josh. But yeah, I don't have a weight on it, man. I'm almost like split 50-50 on it still, you know?
That's the point of doing picks here. Is you're not required to give one on all 10 fights, or the show would be way too long, and I wouldn't have the time for it. So definitely appreciate your input, and I do agree that Joshua Van needs to come out hot. He needs to come out aggressive. If he's just gonna stand back on his heels and expect Kyrez to just like throw a swing and open up a counter hook, he's going to get beat. Josh Van is not going to be on some easy path to getting a KO here. I just anticipate some aggressiveness and some ambition from him as he's coming off of that loss. So yeah, that being said, we got one more fight to discuss, and I want to get through this fight because we've been on here for a bit long already. Feels like our show's a bit longer today than it has been, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially for a pay-per-view event. So that being said, our last discussion is going to, of course, be the co-main event. It would be pretty difficult for us to cover a card with two belts on the line and not discuss both of them. Of course, Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko will be fighting for the third time on Saturday afternoon. With the first and second time, first time Alexa Grasso gets the best of Valentina, and then the second time it's a majority draw because of the judges. Totally blaming the judges on that. That honestly should have been Valentina getting the win, if you ask me. But the judges just wanted to make sure that it was a tie. Very suspicious circumstances around that. But without going any further detail into the past, we can discuss what's coming up on Saturday. And look, I was really on the fence. I was telling Jose before the show that I was really thinking about going Shevchenko here. This is my one weight either way, of course, by process of elimination. It's both our one weight picks here on this co-main event, so it's not going to be anything too groundbreaking, I don't think, from either one of us. But in the end, I did take Alexa Grasso, and for me, really, a lot of people just seem to think that Shevchenko is like, oh, she's 36, she's washed up, she's old, she's not good anymore, this and that. And that's what I totally disagree with. I absolutely vehemently disagree with the fact that just because Shevchenko turned 36 means she's old and out of touch now. That's crazy. These are 125-pound females fighting each other. You could not convince me that Valentina Shevchenko's taken enough brain damage in her entire career than most of Derek Lewis's opponents do in one fight. I mean, it's just crazy. These girls aren't smacking each other with the amount of power that most men are, especially bigger guys. So, look, I'm not really that concerned about Valentina. I think she takes great care of herself, and I think she's going to be in phenomenal shape. One thing I keep hearing around the community is that, oh, Alexa Grasso is going to be the best version of herself that she's ever been on Saturday. The heck is that? The heck is that? So is Valentina. Like they both are. Duh. If the point is to see who is better. Like I don't know, man. A lot of the arguments I'm seeing from this fight just don't make sense. And in the end, it's just close. That's the matter of fact. Both of these fighters are the highest level of the women's MMA community. That's just that. And it's evidenced by the fact that they fought twice, and we still don't know who's better. We're both still putting them as our one-weight picks, even though they fought twice. And there's a small chance that could even happen again after the third time they fight. We could be like Volkanovski and Max Holloway out here, like, oh, maybe we should do it a fourth time. That'll be something different, right, guys? Like, I don't know, man. This is just a situation where Alexa Grasso, I like the improvements. Why I ended up going with Grasso is that I do feel like some of the changes she made, of course, she did get wrestled a little bit. 4 takedowns from Valentina in both of their fights. But I do think Alexa Grasso did slightly better in the boxing aspect of things. And it's proven specifically by the stats as well, as she did outstrike Shevchenko. So I do anticipate some of the changes, the camp that Grasso is a part of, to continue pushing those changes forward. I think Grasso is at the very least going to be winning the striking aspect of things, which leaves up to question how many takedowns Valentina is able to get to land, and whether or not she's able to keep Grasso on her back. I think Grasso on her back is the worst position Grasso can be in. I don't think she's very dangerous at all. With her size, it's hard to land damaging elbows, and she's really not that much of, if at all, a submission threat. So I don't know, man. Yeah, I get that Alexa Grasso submitted Valentina in their first fight, but it was kind of something that she really just fell into, and it was more Valentina's error than Grasso's like being good at grappling. If you ask me, at least. Some other people might have different opinions on that, but without rambling on, this is an extremely close fight. I won't have a single penny on it, not even close. But I do think by a slight margin, if they've made this fight happen 10 times, that Grasso would win 6, and therefore I'll take her as my one weight. What do you think, Jose?
Yeah, Nick. This one for my one weight, yeah, I'm going with Alexa Grasso as well. And as you mentioned, I agree with you. I felt like the last 2 fights, really good arguments that if you're watching it to a certain point, you're seeing Valentina Shevchenko as the one winning. You see a really good argument for that up until, of course, the face crank, and then of course, until the split decision from the judges. Like but there was a point where you're watching majority of the fight and you're thinking to yourself, Valentina's probably going to walk away as champ. And obviously we're proven wrong both times. And to me, I'm actually throwing that part into the equation to some degree as well, which is why I'm going with Alexa Grasso as my one weight. I'm not as confident, but I was surprised too. As you mentioned, she outstriked Valentina last time, and by looking at their stats overall, Alexa Grasso, she has a 4.67. She lands 4.67 punches per minute, while Valentina is 3.28. She has a higher ratio. She lands more significant strikes per minute than Valentina Shevchenko, and Alexa Grasso has been in the UFC now for quite some time, and she does. Her boxing, I do agree, is probably the best suit of hers. That is almost an equalizer when it comes to striking with Valentina Shevchenko. And I do think Valentina is just a little more well-rounded in terms of wanting to embrace the grappling a little more. But Alexa Grasso, she just is not worried whatsoever. She's just proven it. And that's kind of why, like, her willingness to let some of it happen is why she fell into that face crank the first time she fought Valentina Shevchenko. She didn't really force it; it almost came to her and fell on her lap, which is extremely important in these type of fights because Valentina Shevchenko could have easily if she didn't make her mistake, she could have easily won, and Alexa Grasso would have never capitalized off of it. And I think Alexa Grasso is just really good at just capitalizing off those opportunities that will be presented to themselves. But in order for it to happen, they kind of almost need to allow it to happen. And the way I think this fight goes differently would be if Valentina Shevchenko was extremely conservative, played a safe game, and just tried to outpoint Alexa Grasso and just go by unanimous decision. And obviously the safest way is to finish Alexa Grasso out. But Alexa Grasso has yet to be KO'd in her career. So I do think Valentina is good enough to do it, but I just think the chances of it happening is not as likely. As a matter of fact, Valentina's actually been herself KO'd way long time ago, actually, but not way before the UFC. But it is on her record. And that being said, yeah, I'm going with Alexa Grasso. I don't know. think she'll be able to beat Valentina Shevchenko or anything. I think it's going to be a close fight. I'm going with Alexa Grasso by decision, probably even split decision again. But that being said, yeah, I'm going with Alexa Grasso, but I'm not as confident just because I do think Valentina Shevchenko is still on her A game and one of the best female fighters ever.
Sounds good. All right, well, that will do it up for us here at Moneyline MMA. Thanks everybody for listening. Make sure to tune in. As always, next week we're gonna have continuing heat every week. We'll make sure to recap the events of UFC 306 next Monday as well before the show. And following that card, looks like we have a break. UFC 306, the 21st, has zero, count them up, zero UFC fights. The next card will take place September 28th, and that will be headlined by Renato Moicano versus Benoit Saint Denis. Interesting headline there. But that being said, we will not be here a week from today. It will be 2 weeks from today. We will recap UFC 306. Thanks everybody for listening, and see you then.